गोंयांत 6 डिसेंबराक एक व्हडली दुर्घटना घडली आनी 25 लोकांच्यो बळी त्या उज्यान घेतल्यो. अशा वेळार गोंयचे कांय तरणाटे मुखार सरले आनी आपले विचार उमाळे आनी तिडक उक्तायली. तेच तांचे विचार उमाळे आनी तिडक आमी तुमचे मुखार दवरतात.
आयज म्हाका खूब भिरांत दिसता कारण 23 lives were lost in a fire in survey number 159 of Arpora village. म्हाकडे 3 questions आसा. पयली, who changed the zone? That property was a salt pan and it's only in the ODP that you see the part where the fire burnt has suddenly become a settlement land. Second, who allowed the construction when there is no road in the plan? And when there is a salt pan, how can you allow someone to propose to construct below the ground a basement? And finally, my tigui question, bare, assuming this was not permitted in the plans, not permitted as per regulations, who checked the final construction that it was in conformity with the fire code? To matso open the Goa Land Development Building Construction Regulations 2010 and you see which department is responsible for all these 3 things: for giving the zoning certificate needed to convert the land, for checking that the proposed construction is in conformity with the 2011 High Court judgment that road is needed, as well as with the building code, and finally ensuring that the final construction is as per the regulations. The blame can fall on only one group, the Town and Country Planning Department, and the officer needs to answer and be jailed.
Uttai re Goemkarano. Another day, another tragedy in Goa. The heartbreaking incident at a club in Arpora where so many lives were lost unnecessarily. Pun tumi susegad rawai. Why should we trouble ourselves with all these illegal land conversions, destruction of hills, and basically turning our Goa into a ticking time bomb? And make no mistake, this is a man-made disaster, all due to this poor planning and all these illegal land conversions. And we all know who's allowing this to happen. Are Shoel, pun maka kitya padla? That's the best attitude we have today. Today it was someone else. Tomorrow it will be your family, it will be your loved ones, and it will be you. Not maybe, it will be. Mark my words. All these top people, from the politicians to the bureaucrats and everyone involved, they all make money off of this. But who pays the ultimate price? It is us, you and I, not them. So mashe utaire Goenkarano and let's fix our Goa together before it becomes nothing more than a disaster and a case study.
2 दीस पयलीं जो उजो लागलो नायट क्लबाक ती खूब दुखद गजाल. त्या गोष्टी खातीर आमी एक मनशाक कोणाक ब्लेम करपाक शकनात. तर मल्टिपल पीपल यू नीड टू कन्सिडर. आय फील इट्स द एंटायर सिस्टम. आमचे गव्हर्मेंट ऑफिशियल्स किंवा स्टेक होल्डर्स दोगांय बरोबर मेळून विदाउट चेकिंग द रेग्युलेशन्स दे आर गेटिंग परमिशन्स टू पुट अप पेंडल्स. काल पडतो सेरेंडिपिटी फेस्टिवलाक उजो लागलो. 2 दीस पयलीं मडगांव उजो लागलो. सो इट इज नॉट अ इंडिविज्युअल दॅट यू कॅन ब्लेम. आय फील म्हजें व्यक्तिगत मत की हे एक सिस्टमाक आमी ब्लेम करपा जाय आनी हाजे खातीर somewhere we have to blame ourselves also that we are letting this happen. We are not raising enough questions and we are okay with everything that is happening in our state. I feel आमी प्रत्येक गोष्ट जी आमकां मनाक पटना ताजे बद्दल ताजे अगेन्स्ट प्रश्न विचारप इज अ पार्ट ऑफ अवर डेमोक्रेटिक सेटअप. सो हे एक ऑन अ लार्जर स्केल आय फील वी आर ऑल टू बी ब्लेम्ड की हो एक इव्हेंट असो घडलो तो एक ते नायट क्लबाच्या ओनराक आमी धरून गळ्याक ब्लेम करपाक शकना. ताजी चूक ताणें थंय सारकें रेग्युलेशन करूंक ना. ताजे एक स्टेप अहेड थंयचे लोकल तांणी ताका टायमार बंद करपाक लावूंक ना. अगेन द अमाउंट ऑफ पीपल दॅट वर देर नोबडी वॉज देर टू चॅक वेदर त्या एरिये भितर तितले लोक त्या टायमार आसपा जाय काय ना. सो इट इज एट एवरी लेवल आय फील वी नीड टू रीचेक एंड reconsider where we stand.
Today we stand in the shadow of a tragedy in Arpora, a tragedy that took away the lives of over 23 people, lives that should have never been lost. And as a Goan, I feel extremely ashamed and deeply angry. This was not an accident. This was the cost of negligence, this was the cost of corruption, and this was the cost of a system that
where rules are only exist on paper, and where the ones who are responsible to uphold these rules are the ones who are actually looking away. A illegal club operating in the middle of a salt pan with absolutely no fire and safety regulations is not a coincidence. This is an administrative culture where rules are allowed to be broken, and this is normal, and the implementation or the enforcement is always made optional. If our elected government and the ones responsible in each and every department had simply done their jobs honestly, today this tragedy would have never happened. Tourism in Goa is only become dangerous, it's become unsustainable and become reckless. Not because we don't have the potential, but because we do not have any amount of accountability. There is no respect for the people working in the industry, for the tourists who are visiting us, and for the locals who are living here, and also for the ecology that is sustaining all of this. This is not development, but this is only decay. And if we do not demand better, if we do not demand for transparency, for integrity and for accountability, we will continue to mourn such preventable deaths.
So as a young Goan, this incident in Arpora feels deeply unsettling. What happened is just not an incident. It reflects long-standing cracks in our governance system. First of all, the land was a salt pan. The panchayat didn't grant permission, and yet construction still happened. How does something like this move forward without safety norms, without approvals and without accountability? For many young people, this raises a painful but honest question. Are rules in Goa only meant for ordinary people? While those with money or connections find their own routes around the system? Because every Goan family knows the reality. See, a local trying to renew a house license or even build a small shop is made to follow every single rule, every single inspection, every signature. But when it comes to the larger setups, events or commercial establishments, the process seems to be very magically fast forwarded. Somehow loopholes appear, permissions come later, violations get ignored until disaster like this strikes. So I guess it creates a sense of injustice. It feels like the weaker section and common citizens are constantly monitored while bigger players operate in a parallel system. This imbalance is just not frustrating, it is dangerous. Like the Arpora fire shows exactly what happens when safety norms and environmental boundaries are treated as optional. As youth, we are not here to point fingers at individuals. We are here to question the system that allowed this to happen. We want a Goa where development is responsible, where it is transparent and rooted in respect for land, ecology and people's lives. We want accountability that applies to everyone and not only a selective class. We want authorities to ensure that environmental zones like the salt pans are protected and not exploited like this. And most importantly, we want safety to be treated as a first priority and not an afterthought. This incident should not just disappear into headlines and be forgotten. It must be a turning point, a reminder that ignoring rules has real and serious consequences. A call for stronger checks, stricter enforcement and equal treatment for all, maybe big or small. As youth, all we are asking for is very simple. A Goa where governance is fair, transparent and fearless. A Goa where people's lives are mattered more than just profits. If this becomes the moment when authorities finally close the gaps in the system, then at least some good will come from a very scaring incident like this.
हडफड्या नाईट क्लबान जाल्ली घडणूक गोंयचें नांव फक्त स्थानीक पातळीचेर न्हय, फक्त राष्ट्रीय पातळीचेर न्हय, तर पुराय अंतरराष्ट्रीय पातळीचेर बदनाम करपी ही घडणूक जाली. गोंय सदांच सगळ्यांक खबर आसा हे टुरिस्टीक डेस्टिनेशन, टुरिस्ट डेस्टिनेशन आणि डिसेंबर म्हयनो हो पीक टुरिस्ट मुवमेंट, पीक टुरिस्ट सीजन म्हणून सगळ्यांक खबर आसा. आणि ऑन द ईव ऑफ दॅट म्हणजे ताच्याच म्हणजे जो म्हणजे सिजन पिकअप जावपाच्या वाटेर आसतना येदी व्हडली घडणूक गोंयांत जाता हाजे खातीर पुराय अंतरराष्ट्रीय मळाचेर गोंयचें नांव बदनाम जालां. आनी आयज ज्या पद्दतीन ट्युरिजम एक्सप्लोड जाला आनी खास करून ह्या दर्यादेग वाठारांत हाजेर गोंयकार म्हणून ना फक्त चिंतपाची गरज आसा, एक कणखर भुमिका घेवपाची गरज आसा. वेर इज द ओनरशीप ऑफ दीस ट्युरिजम? हाजो ओनर कोण? म्हणजे ज्या पद्दतीची नांवां भायर येता ह्या ते बर्च बाय रोमियो लेन हांचे मालक, तांचे कॉन्ट्रॅक्टर्स, तांचे मॅनेजर्स आनी तांचो स्टाफ हे खंयच्यान येता? गोंयांत इतलो ट्युरिस्ट येता, पयसो मोडटा, ताचो सगळ्यात मोठो वांटो कोणा कडेन वता? गोंयकारां कडेन वता काय भायल्यां कडेन वता? दुसरी गजाल, ज्या पद्दतीन दिल्लीत बशिल्ले सरकार, दलाल आनी एकंदरीत राजकीय क्लास जो आसा जो गोंयांत एक सॅटेलायट स्टेट म्हणून ट्रीट करता, एक दिल्लीची कॉलनी म्हणून ट्रीट करपाचो हो जो प्रयत्न आसा. आनी गोंयांत सगळ्यांक खबर आशिल्लें ही भाटकार दिल्लीकार लॉबी, फाटीं आगरवाडेकार फॅमिली कडेन जी घडणूक जाली, चोडणा वाठारांत ज्या पद्दतीन तो कोण बक्षी वचून थंय मुणकारां कडेन दादागिरी करता, म्हाका दिसता की गोंयकार म्हणून गोंयकार हे सदांच संवेदनशील आनी आज मेरेन गोंयकारांनी जें कितें मेळयलां, जावं तें स्वातंत्र्य, ओपिनियन पोल, घटक राज्य, सगळें कितें तें झगडून मेळयलां. पूण पयले फावट म्हाका अशें दिसता की गोंयकार म्हणून आमी सुस्त जाल्या. गोंयकारांक केन्नाच ही भायल्यांची दादागिरी आनी खास करून हे जे राजकीय वर्ग जो आसा हो दिल्लीच्यान म्हणजे गोंयांत दादागिरी करपाचे हातून वेगळे वेगळे प्रकरणांतल्यान आमकां ही दादागिरी दिश्टी पडटा. ना फक्त जमीन, म्हादयचो मुद्दो, हातून म्हाका दिसता की गोंयकार म्हणून आमी एक कणखर भुमिका घेवपाक फेल जाल्या आनी ती आमकां भुमिका घेवचीच पडटली अशें म्हाका दिसता.
As a Goan, one feels ashamed today to have woken up to this news of the tragedy in Arpora that has claimed at least 25 lives as of now. And it's a tragedy that could have been avoided if only the authorities had done the job that they were supposed to do, that they were paid to do, that they were elected to do. Okay, there's a demolition order for this structure dating back to April 2024. It's almost 2 years that the structure has stood there, and it was known to them that it was illegal, but it was still not demolished. When the demolition order was issued, the owner went to the Directorate of Panchayat, and the Directorate of Panchayat put a stay order on this demolition. Who benefited from this stay order? This tragedy is not an accident. It's a feature of the system that has come to define Goan tourism and how things operate in this government. Okay, when things become irregularized, it gives a rise to an informal economy around it, where there are individuals who stand to benefit. Grease the hands of the right people, you can continue operating a structure flouting all sorts of norms. That building was constructed in a salt pan, which is an eco-sensitive zone. That zone, how did the zone change happens, we don't know. Okay, it had a basement with no exit, and in a building which is already erected in a marshy wetland area, you have a basement. The setting was perfect for this tragedy to happen. I don't think this is an accident. This is how some of these things are meant to be. I'm sorry to say. And now the CM has come out and said the owner will be arrested. But we all know for a fact that it's not just the owner who's responsible for this. There's an entire gamut of people who have allowed this club to operate. And I'm sure this is not the only one. There are many such clubs that operate flouting all kinds of norms and play with our lives. We elect a government trusting them to take care of our lives, where we assume that things are in place because there's a government in place that is supposed to be governing. This party is known for fighting elections. It's called an election machine, and everybody praises the party the way it fights election. But one must wonder, once it wins the election and sits in the government, does it govern with the same spirit? These 25 people who've died will join a long list of people who have died for last few years because nobody was held accountable when the government failed and caused deaths of people. In Goa we had a stampede at Shirgaon. It was very unfortunate incident, and at least the government then should have gotten its act together, should have conducted public audit of safety of public places, because at least leading up to December, which is a very important month for the state, not only because it receives the highest number of tourists during that month, but also a lot of locals, they have their feasts, they have their zatras, there's Christmas around, so people sort of go around and visit places. It's the year end, but we are too busy fighting elections, poaching MLAs and poaching other people, these casual things like people's safety, their lives, sometimes can be ignored. And now the PM has also announced that families of the victim would receive 2 lakh rupees as ex gratia amount. But I was also thinking that shouldn't the owner's property be attached, and the money to compensate these families should not also come from the profit he's made of these people. These are people mostly who died were people who are working in the kitchen. They are working class migrants who have also come to this state for their livelihood. Some of us, when we write about this whole culture of luxury and party in Goa, we are branded as on the least side we are branded as xenophobic, on the worst side we are called as anti-national and urban Naxals and communist. And despite all that, we still continue to raise our voices. There's a whole lot of activists who are constantly raising their voices, but when they do, you know what the Goans ask them? Who's funding you? Right? Nobody's funding me. But you never ask the MLAs or the ministers of when these irregularities come in, who's funding you? Who's funding these guys? Who's funding these political parties? Who's funding this minister? Who's funding these senior government officials who get extensions over extensions in departments and holding plum portfolios? Who's funding them? It is a tragedy for sure, and a one that could have been avoided. Today we are a drugged society because we have forgotten how to seek accountability from the leaders that we elect to power. Okay, and when you have a prime minister who will not do a press conference, that will trickle down into all kinds of political culture. Well, accountability will be thrown out of the window and nobody is responsible for anything. Now the CM will save his face, arrest few people, and given the kind of people who are owning these spaces, this perch is almost like a franchisee across the country. So I'm sure they have deep pockets. So it's not like for a long, even if they get arrested, they won't be in the prison for a very long time. The justice here operates almost exclusively against people who need it the most. And I'm sure that it will operate in the same way. The people who have died will join a long list of people for whose death nobody will be held responsible, accountable, and these things will continue. And probably in another week or so, we'll have a news cycle that will drown out all the voices that have, sort of spoken out against what happened in Arpora today. I hope this doesn't happen again, but we can only hope.
तरणाटे ठळकपणान आपले विचार मांडटात. आमचे गोंयचे तरणाटे पेटून उठतात, प्रश्नूय मांडटात, पूण तांच्यो जापो तांकां मेळटल्यो? ह्या सगळ्या गडबडींत आमचें गोंय शेणलां. आमचें गोंय सामकेंच बदलच्या आदीं आमचे तरणाट्यांनी मुखार सरून एकठांय जावन आवाज उखलचो पडटलो, जाल्यारूच घडये आमचें गोंय मुखार आमचें उरतलें. पळयत रावात द वॉयस फॉर गोंय.
The voice for Goem.